What are we discussing on today's Locked on Diamondbacks podcast? It's week 4 of spring training, so let's check in on those camp battles and see who's in the lead. And let's talk about a couple of D-backs prospects that were showing off in the spring breakout game.
You are Locked on Diamondbacks, your daily Arizona Diamondbacks podcast, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked on Diamondbacks podcast, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day. You're listening to who? Always charismatic host of this podcast, Millard Thomas. Spring training continues to chug along. We are getting dangerously close to the regular season, and so we'll tell you all about the spring training battles on today's podcast. We'll talk about that big spring training breakout game that was going on between D-backs prospects and Rockies prospects, and we'll even talk about the little tune-up start that Zac Gallen had on Sunday because, man, the milkman delivered and he looked good on Sunday. So we'll talk about all that on today's podcast, which is, of course, brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. New customers join today and you'll get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. And thank you for making Locked on Diamondbacks your first listen every day. I would not be able to do this podcast without you, my loyal listeners, sharing, subscribing, reviewing, doing all that so I could do this podcast for you. Thank you. It's free. It's available on all platforms, so please continue to tell your friends. One of those platforms is YouTube, so please hit subscribe to Locked on Diamondbacks on YouTube. We are trying to hit 1,000 subscribers before opening day, so please hit subscribe to Locked on Diamondbacks on YouTube. But now let's talk about those spring training battles. The first one that I want to discuss, that I want to start off with, is the battle for the number 5 starter. And this competition looks like it's going in the direction of a Ryan Nelson. Tommy Henry and Ryan Nelson are definitely the top 2 front runners for this. You still got Slade and probably Blake Walston and stuff in the mix, but it's really coming down to Ryan Nelson, Tommy Henry. As we've said, Tommy Henry came in as the leader entering this spring training. Through the first couple outings, Tommy Henry looked like he was going to secure the number 5 job, but Ryan Nelson has continuously been good throughout the entire spring training. And then recently, during his last 3 outings, Tommy Henry has gone absolutely crushed. He's given up like 13 earned runs over his last 3 outings. He has not been pitching effectively. He is not executing like he was at the beginning of the season. And so now he has a good opportunity to show the D-backs what he's made out of in terms of his bounce back ability, right? How does he respond to the adversity he's faced with this spring training? How is he going to improve on what he was working on at the beginning that was working for him versus what isn't working now in his most recent outings? What has he learned from the dichotomy of those two situations, from when his stuff was working versus when it wasn't working? So Tommy Henry is going to have the opportunity to showcase his ability to bounce back in a big way, but I don't think it will be enough to secure this number 5 job because Ryan Nelson had just been steady throughout the entire spring training. He had a start on Saturday against the Texas Rangers, I believe, where he once again looked really good. 3.2 innings pitched, 1 earned run, 3 strikeouts. There was a little bit of control issues with the 3 walks allowed, but I think that's okay because when you looked at that game, whenever he was falling behind in counts, he wasn't using his fastball, his go-to pitch, to try to work his way back into counts. He tried to use his secondary stuff, his slider stuff. So the fact that he was doing that against a Rangers team who still was starting a lot of the players that were in the World Series, Ryan Nelson looked much improved in that start, going with his secondary stuff, not just relying on his fastball. Ryan Nelson, throughout the entire spring training, has showed the D-backs the developments of his pitches, the stuff he's been working on this offseason. And then through each start, he's been able to work on different things. He's been able to showcase that he's not just a fastball dependent guy. He's showing you all the weaknesses that he's had in the past. He's showing you that he's been able to work on those and he's starting to turn a corner on a lot of those weaknesses. So for Ryan Nelson, I think he's shown a lot of growth this spring training. I think Tommy Henry at certain points has shown growth, but he has not been able to consistently execute. Right now, he just has to listen to the messages of Torey Lovello and Brent Strom of what they want him to do. I think as it currently stands, Ryan Nelson's definitely in the lead for this job. And I think Tommy Henry will probably be optioned back to AAA to start the year. I could see him starting the year with the Reno Aces and being a starter and leading that rotation to begin the season. For some reason, if Ryan Nelson wins the job, I think Tommy Henry will go down to AAA to start the year. But if Tommy Henry wins the job, for some reason, I think Ryan Nelson could come out the pen as a long reliever. I don't know why it wouldn't be the same if it was a reverse, but for some reason, my feelings are if Tommy Henry wins the job, Ryan Nelson could be the long reliever. But if Ryan Nelson wins the job, Tommy Henry will start the season in AAA. But as it currently stands, I would definitely say it's Ryan Nelson's job to lose. He has a great strikeout to walk ratio this spring training. It has been consistent throughout the entire offseason. I think he's in the lead right now over Tommy Henry. If Tommy Henry is not careful, maybe the other guys in the competition, like the Slades and the Bryce Jarvises, could even leapfrog a Tommy Henry in the competition as well. But that's not the case just yet. As it currently stands, definitely Ryan Nelson as the number one, with Tommy Henry as the number two. How about the battle for backup shortstop? Blaze Alexander just continues to impress and crush all weekend. Picked up a couple more hits on Saturday. Some incredible defensive plays on Sunday, turning double plays. Blaze just continues to do everything that you would want from a prospect in spring training who is fighting for a job. He is hitting the ball off the cover. It's not just the average. The ball is flying off the bat. The exit velo is high. He's been a good base runner. The defense, he's making plays defensively every single day. He's shown you everything that you would want as a D-backs front office. I don't know why Blaze wouldn't want to win. I don't know why Blaze wouldn't win the job outside of just giving it to a more experienced guy like Elvis Andrus, who did have a hit on Sunday. Kevin Newman continues to provide nothing for this D-backs team. So I think the competition is coming down to Blaze versus Elvis Andrus. Blaze, obviously younger than Elvis. He's been incredible this spring training. I think the job has to go to Blaze Alexander. I think there's so many reasons why. He could be better than Geraldo Perdomo. He could be the D-backs starting shortstop until Jordan Lawler gets called up. Like, there is a path where Blaze Alexander is better than Perdomo. There's a path where Blaze Alexander at least plays his way into being a trade chip, being a trade piece, and being like a Dominic Fletcher where we could move him for maybe an interesting pitching prospect like you got back in a Christian Mena when you traded away a Dominic Fletcher. So Blaze either can be your starting shortstop or he could be a trade chip. For Elvis Andrus, I just don't see a path where he's better than Geraldo Perdomo. There's not a path where he turns himself into being a trade asset that other teams would want. The ceiling is just so much higher with the Blaze Alexander. Offensively, defensively, I know Elvis Andrus is a long-time MLB veteran, but at this point of both of their careers, I think Blaze Alexander is potentially a better player than Elvis Andrus. And what he showed me so far this spring training, he's checked every box on the list. Offensively, defensively, he looks like a guy that's ready for MLB action. And because of that, I would give Blaze Alexander an opportunity to be the backup shortstop for the D-backs on opening day. Now I want to talk about Zac Gallen, and I have a couple more spring training battles that I want to get into. But of course, if you need parts for your car, then the best place to go is going to be eBay Motors, because passion, drive, and patience, what brings home the winning trophy, is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. eBay guaranteed fit only available to U.S. customers. All right. Let's get back into the Locked on Diamondbacks podcast. But as you know, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel, Locked On Sports Today. Baseball fans, mark your calendars for March 20th at 7 p.m. Eastern for the best MLB season preview coming exclusively to Locked On Sports Today on March 20th at 7 p.m. Eastern. Be the first to get local insight from the MLB local experts of the Locked On Podcast Network. Find it on March 20th at 7 p.m. Eastern on the Locked On Sports Today 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channel app. Now let's get back into the podcast and let's talk about a couple more spring training battles. The next one I want to discuss is the battle for the lefties in the bullpen, because there's probably going to be, for most of the season, two lefties in the D-backs bullpen. There's currently three guys battling, and recently when we did this update, I said Sal Frank and Mantiply were probably the two guys in the lead. I said it was dangerously close. I said it was going to come down to the wire. But if I had to choose, I said it was a 1A with Sal Frank and Mantiply, with Kyle Nelson as the 1B, mostly because the most recent success, I think, this spring training and going back to last season, Sal Frank in the second half with what he's done this spring training, I think deserved a spot over Kyle Nelson. And then Joe Mansply, the veteran experience he has, plus what he's also been able to do this spring training. Like, all of them have put up similar numbers this spring training, but this past weekend we saw Sal Frank and Mansply both give up earned runs. We didn't see Kyle Nelson this weekend, so I think the competition just got a little bit tighter. I think Kyle Nelson's right there in the mix, even though I felt like Sal Frank and Mansply were in the lead before. Again, I think Kyle Nelson's right there in the mix. Steve Gilbert of MLB.com wrote an article the other day detailing how Kyle Nelson's really battling for an opening day spot because of his experience with the D-backs already. Kyle Nelson does have a chance to make it. Obviously, he's been there with the D-backs the last couple of seasons. He's been good in the past. Last year wasn't his best year, but the previous year, Kyle Nelson at points, throughout his D-backs tenure, there was a time where Kyle Nelson was arguably the best D-backs reliever, right? There was a point where it was like, is Kyle Nelson a top two guy coming out the D-backs bullpen? And I wouldn't have even argued with you if you said that, because I think I was someone that was arguing for that opinion. I think I was pro back in 2022 when Kyle Nelson had a 2.19 ERA where 37 innings pitched. I definitely told you Kyle Nelson is arguably the D-backs best reliever. I probably had it between him or Joe Mansply, who was the D-backs all-star back in 2022, but those two guys were the only two reliable lefty relievers that the D-backs had in 2022. Really the only two reliable relievers, period, that the D-backs had back in 2022. So we have already built-in experience with Kyle Nelson. We've already seen what his ceiling can be. Kyle Nelson does have a pathway to being a pretty good reliever for the D-backs. So when I look at this lefty competition right now between those three guys, like, it's hard to say. I feel like Mansply is in the lead because he's just the most experienced one of that bunch. I feel like the D-backs have the most trust in a Joe Mansply. And so if that's the case, it comes down to a Sal Frank or Kyle Nelson. And I think that's a coin toss as it currently stands right now. Sal Frank better last season, but Kyle Nelson was really good in 2022. I think the real wild card is, could the D-backs go with Sal Frank and a Kyle Nelson and cut a Joe Mansply, or could they go with three lefties on opening day? I don't know. Maybe they think Kyle Nelson, Sal Frank, and Mantiply is better than whatever other righty reliever that they were considering for the bullpen. So I definitely think the D-backs are going to only pick two lefties. And as it currently stands, I still probably would choose Sal Frank and Mantiply to be the leaders in this competition, but I don't think there's a training camp battle potentially closer right now than who's going to be the two lefties for the D-backs out the pen. Then how about the other relievers that are on the bubble? Luis Frias, he had a good Sunday with the split squad. He's looked pretty good this spring training. 2.35 ERA this spring training. Frias is someone that I think could be a potential swing piece for the D-backs, X factor out the pen this upcoming season. His fastball and slider combination was looking really good on Sunday. The slider looked excellent. That fastball was hitting the upper 90s. Luis Frias, we know, is someone that has all the stuff in the world. We know he's someone by the eye test can look absolutely phenomenal, but also has command issues, also likes to give up walks and a lot of hard contact. But I think he showed us something in the second half last year. I think Frias is someone that could be a huge swing piece for the D-backs this upcoming season. I think he's a big X factor that, D-backs fans and the national consciousness need to keep an eye on, because I like Frias as a potential swing piece for the D-backs out the pen. Slade looked solid on Sunday as well. He gave up an earned run, but he did go 2 innings, struck out 4, and his ability to get the whiffs and make people chase, I think his overall stuff makes him a really interesting guy for the competition of long reliever. I don't think he's going to win that number 5 job. I think that's Ryan Nelson. But if you're looking for a long reliever, I think Slade has a good chance of winning that job, or if not winning it, getting called up in the near future. If the D-backs ever need a spot starter, ever need a different long reliever in the future, because Slade, I think, with his pitching arsenal, with his repertoire to throw upper 90s and have that secondary stuff as well, I think he's a really interesting reliever. Maybe potential starter down the line. I think he's someone to keep an eye on for, and he is someone that I think could make an impact with the D-backs this upcoming season. So Slade, he may not start the year on the opening day roster, but I don't think it will be very long before he does make an appearance with the D-backs if he does start the season in AAA. Bryce Jarvis, he's coming off a really strong outing. He didn't make an appearance this weekend, but his most recent outing, 3.1 innings pitched, no earned runs, 5 strikeouts. After starting spring training really tough with his first 2 outings, he's been picking it up recently. I think he's still in the back when you think of long relievers for this D-backs team. But like a Slade, I think he will have an opportunity to make an impact with the D-backs this season. He's another guy that can throw mid to upper 90s. And I like all these young guys, the Slades, the Friases, the Jarvises. I think they're all pretty interesting, all pretty intriguing. I think they can all make an impact with the D-backs this season. And then the one final guy that's on the bubble for the D-backs bullpen that I don't think has a chance to make the opening day roster, but do want to mention, Corbin Martin pitched on Saturday. 1 inning pitch, 1 hit, 1 walk, but continues to put up a 0 this spring training. Again, the only guy that we can still talk about from that Zac Gallen deal. Corbin Martin, I don't think will be there opening day, but is there a path to Corbin Martin potentially making an impact with the D-backs this year, getting a call up? Yeah, I think Corbin Martin will still have a chance and an opportunity to make an impact with the D-backs this year. I mean, why not? As the last guy from that Zac Gallen deal, I think the D-backs still want to get some kind of return and value from it. I think Corbin Martin will get at least an opportunity with the D-backs at some point this season. Now we'll talk about that spring breakout game between prospects and Zac Gallen's sharp start on Sunday. But before we get into that conversation, if you think the D-backs are going to make the playoffs this year, then why not go to FanDuel Sportsbook and bet it? Because FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook. Say goodbye to busted brackets, because FanDuel lets you bet on every game of the tourney. Whether you're betting on a big upset or a 1 seed, it's time to go dancing on America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. That's $200 to use on point spreads, money lines. You can even pick who's going to win it all. My favorite thing to do is the same game parlay. Now that baseball season is in full swing, I like to take the D-backs money line, Corbin Carroll over on total bases and Ketel Marte RBI. That pays out at plus 300. I'm definitely going to be putting some money down. If you want to put some money down, just visit fanduel.com/lockedon and bet on college hoops until they cut down those nets. All right. Let's get back into the Locked On Diamondbacks podcast. Got one more spring training battle I want to discuss. That's the battle for backup catcher. I think this one is going to be Tucker Barnhart all the way. He just looks way more comfortable in the role. He looks way more established as the backup catcher, considering he's a longtime MLB veteran. I like the way he looks back there. I think he's been solid throwing out guys this spring training. I think he's been consistently accurate throwing the ball down to second, throwing the ball down to third. Jose Herrera had a bad throwing error on Sunday. I think Barnhart just looks like the guy with more experience, which he is. So I think Tucker Barnhart will win the backup catcher position for the Arizona Diamondbacks. Zac Gallen, he made a start on Sunday, and damn, did Zac Gallen look good, because Gallen looked like a regular season Gallen. I would have thought it was opening day, because Gallen was extremely efficient on Sunday for the Arizona Diamondbacks going against the Los Angeles Angels. He went 4.1 innings pitched, 58 pitches, wasn't even supposed to go out there for the fifth, but because he was so efficient, Torey Lovullo was like, fine, we could throw you out there for one more inning. Pitched into the fifth, no earned runs, 1 hit, 4 strikeouts, and it was the full Zac Gallen arsenal. Four-seamer, slider, knuckle curve, changeup. We saw everything from Zac Gallen. He was extremely efficient against the Angels. He generated 7 whiffs on 21 swings. He looked absolutely dominant against the Angels. And Zac Gallen talked about how good he felt. Torey Lovullo talked about how good Zac Gallen looked. It was an overall really, really impressive day from Zac Gallen, who was just able to throw every single kind of pitch that he wanted to effectively. Right now, he's working on throwing that slider not as hard, because a lot of times he says when he throws that slider as hard as he can, it ends up being more like a cutter. But apparently, he's throwing it a little bit less hard, throwing it about only 85% of the strength that he would normally throw with, just because he wants to get a little bit more break on it, make it more like a fundamental slider. So Zac Gallen has been working on that. Think about that. A guy who's coming off a Cy Young caliber season is trying to get even better with his pitches, trying to improve his pitches, trying to throw different types of pitches. Zac Gallen is a true competitor. I think because of that is a big reason why I have so much faith in Gallen taking home at least one Cy Young award throughout his career, because I don't know how many pitchers care about the game, care about their, working on their own game and getting better as much as a Zac Gallen. I was at the D-back spring training game on Sunday, and, playing the Reds, me and my roommate were talking about Anthony Rendon and how he's been on record about how baseball is not his number one thing and how he doesn't love the sport. Zac Gallen, you can tell baseball's number one on his mind. It's his number one passion. And you can see why he's been in the lab, because he gives a damn about his performance and being the best version of himself, which not every athlete cares about. Some athletes just care about the money. And you know what? That's okay too. Zac Gallen actually cares about his craft and getting better. That's why I'm such a Zac Gallen fan. And as a guy who's, a couple years away from free agency, D-backs have to start thinking about the future with Zac Gallen and whether or not they want to extend him, because it's getting pretty close to that time. So Zac Gallen looked phenomenal on Sunday, and he looked ready for action, ready for opening day. And now I want to talk about the spring breakout game between D-backs prospects and Rockies prospects, because something really interesting happened in that game. Jordan Lawlar, he was very impressive. He had a big hit in that game. But before the big hit, his big double, something that was very interesting, Jordan Lawlar called strike 3 on a pitch. Jordan Lawlar said, that was not a strike. That was off the plate. He challenges the strike call of Angel Hernandez. Of course, the ABA system, the automatic ball strike system, reviews it and says that thing was 1 inches off the plate. The call gets reversed. Angel Hernandez is wrong. Jordan Lawler challenges a call at the plate. Within seconds, he's determined correct. That's how it should be. When you look at the automatic ball strike system, that's how it should be. We should be getting the calls correct. There shouldn't be an argument. The player felt like it was the wrong call. The system said it was the wrong call, so it got corrected. And guess what? Immediately after it got corrected, back to a ball, Jordan Lawler scorches a double. That is what I'm talking about. Jordan Lawler is going to be a building block for this D-backs team. Such a toolsy guy. The D-backs are actually kind of loaded at shortstop because if the D-backs do make Blaze Alexander their backup shortstop, where Geraldo Perdomo already dealing with a little injury, you might have a three-headed monster at that position, and you might have to make a tough decision on who to trade, which is always a good problem to have. I got too many quality players at one position. Then you could trade one of those players for a position of need, right? D-backs had too many outfielders, so you traded Dalton Varsho for Gabriel Moreno and Lourdes Gurriel. Maybe you could do the same with one of those shortstops that you have, and you could trade it for a pitcher or some other position of need. And then one other thing from that game that I want to note, Drew Jones, you cannot give up on Drew Jones. Once again, he went 0 for 2, but he just shows off the tools. Everyone's talking about his throw from center field. He didn't even throw the guy out, but the accuracy, threw it 94 miles per hour on a rope from dead center all the way home. Never skipped a beat, never skipped off the ground. Like, Drew Jones has a rocket of an arm. He has elite athleticism, elite arm strength. He's got raw power. Like, Drew Jones, I do think is the real deal. And if he can develop on the minor league level and stay healthy, Drew Jones could be another impact player coming up in a few years with the Arizona Diamondbacks. So the future is bright with the D-backs. The present is bright with the D-backs. And we are slowly marching our way through spring training as we get closer to the regular season. That's it for this edition of the Locked On Diamondbacks podcast. Come back tomorrow for more Diamondbacks news coverage and insight. And as always, stay safe, stay healthy. Doses.